John,
Oh,
Simon.
John, Nick, how are you? Good to see you.
Have we got an event today? So today we are joined by Solomon Schmidt, who, if you haven't heard of yet, you will very shortly, because he has written a biography of J.K. Rowling called Pen That Changed the World. It is, I think, going to be one of the vital tools you will need going forward to understand the lake inspiration for J.K. Rowling's imaginative creations of both Strike and Harry Potter. And I say this as the lake guy. Solomon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you both. And I should say, I understand that I'm in the presence of two giants. I've been looking forward to this conversation somewhat nervously, but I also, it's a delight to see you both in person, because I was reading what you wrote about JK, and Nick, what you found about her life was very helpful to my research. And John, what you analyzed about her life, has, you don't need to hear it again, that it's influenced a lot of people, myself included. I mean, I recently referenced you at a speech I gave at a conference talking to Christians in Tennessee about Harry Potter. And it was a homeschool conference where for decades in different homeschool communities, which you probably know, Harry Potter was ostracized as the work of Satan and the devil. And there is still that belief to some extent, which you both know. I'm going to say a lot of things that I assume you both already know, so I'll just lay that out right at the beginning. So I made this speech and I said, when I was walking through the different Christian allusions in Harry Potter, down to very specific references in Deathly Hallows, of course, I said, just in case you all are still skeptical of this, even though JK says they were deliberate, I can tell you that serious scholars, John Granger and other people who are Christians, have pointed this out for decades and sadly been probably abused for it. But
not me.
Okay.
I got off easy. Easy, but
the only place.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I want to go back to something that Nick was saying about, the importance of this book. I mean, Nick and I have both written reviews. If you're a Substack subscriber and you're watching this, it's down below. If you're a YouTube watcher, go over to the Substack site and read all those things. But this book fills a need that has been felt in the Rowling readers community. Potter pundits, serious strikers, all of us, especially post Lake and Shed. I mean, after 2019 and then 2023, 24, when Rowling again really leaned into the Lake inspiration of her work, which comes largely from her unresolved personal issues, we haven't had a quality biography to lean on. And you created this book. It's not a book of literary criticism, but it really is a book of straight biography. Let's just get the facts, the facts as we know them out there with the interview material that is available, and lay it out so that it's comprehensible, and that, I mean, you've laid the foundation for the work that's going to come on top of this. And that contribution to the field is invaluable. I said it in my review, I'll say it here, that
thank you.
Really the interviews and the citations, it's like 80, 90 pages in the back of the book, that are cued to the page references. If a Rowling reader was just starting out and they went through that text and just read those interviews in sequence across those 80 pages and took notes throughout the whole thing, they would have really the foundation for the late work. Wow. That and reading Nick Jeffrey, but that is and of course your work. This is an invaluable thing now, and it was done against currents and headwinds that no one who hasn't confronted Team Rowling has any idea what that is. I mean, it's a very wealthy woman who is rightly committed to her privacy and the privacy of her family.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you, if you've got the equivalent of $1 billion in the bank or on credit, and you want your family protected, by God, you're protected. And and so all of the people that you want to talk to her husband. You want to talk to her, but that's off limits. You can't talk to her. You can't talk to her children. You can't talk to her sister. Her father apparently is in hospice care, so he's not talking. And by God, if you try to approach, Sean Harris or the Sisters of Swing or all the people that will know the secrets, well, good luck with that, because they've all taken blood oaths that they won't do that, or they're just that happy people. But there's people like Lucy Shepherd. I mean, why can't we talk to Lucy Shepherd? And find out what she was.
By the way, I saw, I think we had discussed the potential of talking about some of these interview requests and attempts. Do you want me to go into now my attempts to talk to those individuals, or keep that till later?
Yeah.
This is fourth wall broken. Anyway,
there we go. Edit. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I tried to transition that in a way that wouldn't break the fourth wall. It came off a bit clumsy.
That's great.
No, that's fine.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I caught myself from saying in the email you sent with the questions beforehand. although I did, the questions obviously were excellent, so I took the time to think through my answers. So I did write some things down to make sure to share with you, because so. Seriously,
when I was doing the Potter Pundit thing way back in the day, back when you were in diapers, it was all about being ambushed. I would go on to a show and I would get hit by just crazy questions.
Yeah,
and it was all gotcha time. It was all aha. I thought, come on, and I grew up in a combative academic environment. I went to Phillips Exeter and University of Chicago, and that was all just open warfare in the classroom. And so I was built for that. That was fine with me. But I thought, why would you do that? Why would you do that? And so our policy, and my policy, every podcast I've ever done, MuggleNet, Leaky Cauldron, and here is give them all the questions in advance.
Yeah.
Let them do the preparations that they have, and then you get the best out of that.
Sure.
There's not going to be any gotcha moments. It's not what we're about. I mean, this is. I mean, I expressed my disappointment with parts of the book in my review. Yes. And that most of them aren't your fault. I don't know why they put those sick things in there. That just drives readers insane. Anyway, but.
By the way, I agree.
Why am I going to lean on that here and tease you about that? I mean, I'm sure that's got to be a scar on your back somewhere. But that's
totally fair game for two reasons. One is I'd like to hear any ways that the book can be improved if there are future editions. And the second thing is I was fully anticipating there to be critiques with the Sikh thing. I wish I had insisted that they not be included. The explanation, not excuses, that my publisher wanted them in, and so they were in. But I could have, and in hindsight, I wish I had made that a priority to exclude them. So hopefully future editions, if there are any.
I really hope the UK edition, because can you imagine I can't imagine, Nick, what that's going to be like in the UK. Everybody's like, oh, so the English spellings are not only misspellings, but they're critical mistakes that have to be marked, just
typical American.
Yeah. Anyway, that's right. No one's going to blame the publisher. I had publishers, I published with Tyndale, and so they didn't want certain things in there. I mentioned that Peter Pettigrew's name meant short penis, and Tyndale went nuts.
Wow.
John, every Christian bookstore in America is going to say, oh, the penis book. That's going to be the only thing they remember about this whole book is the penis book. I said, oh, well, it's too bad, because it's a great joke. It's one of the Rowling's funniest names, Anyway, let's go to the questions. Nick,
yes.
I trust Nick to I'm going to close off what I was saying and say, let's get to some, some questions here.
Okay.
Or you can interrupt, Nick.
Okay. When you're ready.
So yeah, Rowling's headwind, and we'll talk about that in a minute, about the pushback that she gave to Solomon in his efforts to actually talk to people that might know some things about her biography. And he did talk to a lot of great people. We'll talk about that too. But that this book exists despite all those contrary currents and headwinds, well, really is a testimony to your skill in the craft and your persistence. And we get this product. I mean, look at that book. That is you can see all the pages I've turned over inside the text. It's an invaluable text. Nick.
So, John,
let's start grilling this guy.
Well, I think we've covered why we need the book. I think that's covered. But what I'm interested in, Solomon, is why you needed to write it. So it's not your first biography. You've written a very well received biography of Alan Dershowitz. You've covered biography in your History Bite series for children. And now you've chosen J.K. Rowling. But what drew you in? Why was this the book you needed to write?
What drew me in was I initially had hesitancy about Harry Potter as someone who was born and raised Christian and came from a conservative household. There were people in my life who thought that Harry Potter was of the devil and influencing children towards the occult. And so I wasn't allowed to read it till I was about 16. And at that point, my parents gave me leeway on what I could read. But believe it or not, the initial thing that precipitated it was I love Tolkien. Oh, by the way, I should mention the second reason that I was hesitant about it. As a Lord of the Rings fan and a Tolkien fan, which ties into my next point, I had this weird sort of idea that you couldn't be fans of both series, or that as John and I have spoken about, I was a Tolkien fan who made fun of Harry Potter fans because Tolkien stole, or J.K. stole everything from Tolkien. Although you can find a Harry Potter fan out there who said Tolkien stole everything from J.K. That was funny. But anyway, so you run into that, and I was in that camp for a while. I used to rib my Harry Potter fan friends mercilessly as a Tolkien fan. So for those illogical reasons, with all due respect to people who still hold the first one, I stayed away from the series. But I love Tolkien and Lewis to death. I feel like I know those people. I grew up reading their books, reading about their life. And when I was 16, I visited, Nick, your home, the UK, in the summer of 2019. And I interviewed Walter Hooper, who was the secretary to C.S. Lewis, and in his lifetime, and probably for all time, the greatest C.S. Lewis scholar. With all due respect to my friend Michael Ward, who's another C.S. Lewis scholar, Walter, as you probably both know, knew C.S. Lewis for a period of time towards the end of Lewis's life. He knew Tolkien well for 10 years. He knew the Tolkien family. He knew Douglas Gresham. And more than that, more than just knowing them, he wrote endless books about Lewis. He published his collected letters, thousands of letters. He wrote the definitive biography. He wrote the companion. He published companion and guide. He published all these works by Lewis that hadn't been published in Lewis's lifetime, and so on. So I talked to him, met him in Oxford, and it was life-changing on a really profound level to be in England and walk where Tolkien and Lewis walked. I'm getting chills saying that right now. And to see the UK at 16, my only thought was, I would like to take people here and give them the experience I had, but in the most amazing way possible. So come and see Tolkien and Lewis sites, but with 4- and 5-star hotels, amazing restaurants, do a sort of tour. And I talked to an older friend of mine named Bill Potter, who, John, you remind me a lot of each other. He's read 10,000 books. He owns 10,000 books. He's the best historian I know. And he's a fan of Harry Potter. And he was an elder in his Presbyterian church. And it was like, my gosh, here's a Christian who's actually allowed to read Harry Potter. And he's an elder in his church, and he reads them to his grandchildren. What is this? So I'm telling him about my idea for a Tolkien and Lewis tour through England. And we're looking at the map of the UK. And he's a tall guy from Virginia with a beard, and he leans over the map and he points up to Scotland and he goes, well, if you're doing a tour through the UK around Tolkien and Lewis, then you should add on J.K. Rowling sites in Scotland, and go up here to the Jacobite steam train in the Scottish Highlands, which is Hogwarts Express and all this. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's Harry Potter, whatever. Okay, all right, fine. I'll read the books and give them a chance. And I went home, spring of 2020 through COVID, read Harry Potter. You guys will kill me for doing this, but I watched the movies first and then read the books. And I was blown away by the books, by Deathly Hallows. It was one of the most life-changing books I've read. I know I'm using those words a lot, life-changing, profound, but that is the right idea here. It was, when I read Deathly Hallows, I felt the same feelings as when I read Lord of the Rings and Return of the King. This idea of conquering against the odds, conquering darkness against the odds, even though Lord of the Rings has a sad ending. This idea that Mordor could still be defeated, the idea of courage in the face of fear, love in the face of fear, and all these, and adventure and fighting and the noble quest and all that stuff that sounds so cliched. It was all there in Deathly Hallows. And of course, which was the real shocker to me, thinking that these were satanic books, like Christian values, left, right, and center, like the whole thing. And not just values, but later on, as I came to find out through reading Hogwarts Professor, through reading Beatrice Groves and other people, like very specific references to the life and work of Christ in those books, and deliberately so. So all of that, and then couple that, and this is the end of my answer, couple that with the fact that it was written, the best-selling book series of all time was written by a single mother on welfare dealing with domestic abuse and sexual assault, and which is horrible, obviously, and depression and poverty and a miscarriage and the death of her mother and all these terrible tragedies in her personal life. To find out that the best-selling book series of all time was written by a person dealing with all that in her life, and to see that it's J.K. Rowling, as you said, Nick, in your review, one of the century's great lives, for better or worse, one of the most influential women of our times. To see that she didn't have a comprehensive biography to the level I wanted. When I went to research for my tour through England and Scotland, I was shocked by the lack of biographical resources about her. And after I finished my biography on Alan Dershowitz, I said to my publisher, there needs to be a biography of J.K. Rowling. And because probably no other publisher in the U.S. will release one now, since she's censored and banned everywhere.
Still radioactive, yeah.
Yeah, well, Skyhorse, my publisher, they're not afraid to publish people on both sides of the aisle. They published Michael Cohen's book, and Donald Trump tried to shut it down. And 10 years later, they published Melania Trump's memoir, which no one would pick up. And so just a really eclectic, interesting publisher. And he said, my publisher said, absolutely, that's great, do it. And so that is what precipitated me, or led to me writing it. Stupefied by Harry Potter, by the Deathly Hallows, and by the fact that it was written by this lady dealing with all this in her personal life. And it was just, this is, as you've said, it was a void that seemed so obvious to me to fill that I couldn't believe it hadn't been filled. So that I basically, without trying to sound really narcissistic, I went looking for this book on Amazon 6 years ago and couldn't find it. And thought, okay, I got to write it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm blessed to be in a position, quite frankly, where I could take the time to do that. My age helps with that because I still live at home. This is, for me, it's an amazing project, and it helps with expanding my education, view of the world, learning from gentlemen like you. It's not the same as going to university, but there's many aspects to this book and my book on Alan Dershowitz that were like a university education, but a priceless education at that, because you're interacting with all these amazing, interesting, smart people and getting to know them, which is the really wonderful part, which of course you can do at university. But these books kind of concentrate all these interesting people around these particular subjects. Alan Dershowitz, my gosh, the most interesting people from the last half century of U.S. life know that guy and are willing to talk about him.
Before we started chatting today on camera, you were talking about how, you know, all the things you've been reading just to catch up with what Rowling was reading, and Nick and I, it just both started laughing because that's true of us as well. We started before you did, but that's largely been, we were talking about schoolboy novels, and I hadn't read any schoolboy novels. I'd read the Hardy Boys and some Nancy Drew, but I hadn't read anything of classic genre schoolboy and schoolgirl fiction. Not Billy Bunter, not Mallory Towers, not Molesworth, none of it until I read Harry Potter, and then I went back and learned all that stuff. Anyway, so that is true that really being a Rowling reader is its own education. And if you go back into the recent Rowling Studies podcast that we've done, where Nick, where I'll say, gosh, we really should read this. Nick actually goes back and reads those books that I say we should read, and we talk about them, and they're mind-blowing. I Capture the Castle and things like that. It's like, oh my gosh.
I remember the conversations are more, we should read this. And then a few weeks later, I come back and say, I've read it, John. And then John says, well, we should do a podcast about you reading it then.
And then I have to go and either I have to pretend I read it, or I have to actually go back and read the book and then find out what a good recommendation it was that I made to Nick. You know what I mean? Anyway,
well,
this is supposed to be about Solomon here. Okay, Solomon.
No. Didn't C.S. Lewis say, you don't know a book till you've reread it? And by the way, that's where I'm going to doff my hat to you both and be totally open about the fact that besides Tolkien, Lewis, and a bit of Agatha Christie, I had not been, and am still woefully not where I want to be in terms of having read the sources that J.K. Herself read. And the same with Tolkien and Lewis. I mean, my gosh, I would love to, and you would probably sit there and say, well, why haven't you then? Or people have said it to me, I need to read the Norse sagas. I need to read lots of other books and works. And so that's part of my journey, I hope, over a long period of time. But in terms of the book, to me, the most important thing was to get the chronological facts down and not to pretend like I'm going to be able to provide people this earth-shattering analysis, when in my mind it was very simple. And I put this right in the acknowledgements. You want the analysis? It's already been done very well, and I am not going to do it better. And there was a gentleman I know who wrote about 115 books. His name was Jay Adams. He founded a branch of Christian theology and counseling called Nouthetic Counseling, which was a response to Freudian counseling, where he basically said we need to return to the Bible's solutions for spiritual problems and hold ourselves responsible for our sins and whatever. And he wrote about 110 books. One of the things he said was, if it's been done well, to the best of your knowledge, just recommend it if it's already been done well. So yeah, that's where I'm at. But I'm ready. I hopefully have many years of my life in front of me to continue. And what I know is I'm just at the beginning of hopefully a lifelong journey of reading, studying, learning about J.K. Rowling.
One thing I can recommend to you is read the books that Rowling uses as her epigraph material for Cormoran Strike. That will get you a good start. Anyway, you wrote in the acknowledgements that you've mentioned already at the book's end that you didn't write this book as a work of literary criticism, but I want people out there to know that you do discuss everything she has written or collaborated on, Philosopher's Stone through Ink Black Heart. Okay, so I mean it's not totally up to date, but it's pretty doggone close, especially as the previous biography that was available, I think only the first 3 books were out, or maybe Goblet of Fire was out. I mean, it's been 25 years since someone has written a Rowling biography. What would you have included in those discussions of the books if you had been writing literary criticism? I mean, am I right? I don't know. What you've just said is you'll say, go read those books over there. Read, John Granger's books, Beatrice Grove's books. What do you say? What would you have included about those books if you thought, okay, this has got to be literary criticism?
If I didn't need sleep at night, and I'm being dead serious when I say this, because there's someone I know, he's a real cheeky fellow, and he's funny. When I say things like, oh, I can't read this book, I don't have time, whatever, he goes, yes, you do. You eat lunch instead of reading, or whatever. It's like, if I had those extra 7 or 8 hours, I don't know if I would have to use them for something else, but I would have done 2 things. One, I was thoroughly intrigued by the alchemical layers to the text. So I would have gone in depth on the alchemical structure to the books, which you opened up, John. I would have gone into depth about that, or tried to. And I would have also immersed myself in Greek and Roman myth and analyzed the books from that standpoint. I'm sure there are others. Those are the 2 main pillars I absolutely would have dived into more if it were a work of literary criticism. And I mean, what I want, which we don't have, is what Humphrey Carpenter had with J.R.R. Tolkien. It's what Walter Hooper had with C.S. Lewis. Endless letters that these people have written, or in J.K.'s case, letters and emails and text messages. Wouldn't that be great? And the manuscripts, obviously, which obviously no one is probably ever going to see, right? I mean, I'll just make that prediction.
Nick and I aren't going to live that long, but you may see it.
Hey, let's not talk that way. But no, seriously, so that's the issue here. Is I would want letters, I would want emails, I would want text messages, and I would want the manuscripts to dive into the literary criticism. But even without those, yes, if I had been writing a work of literary criticism, the alchemy and the Greco-Roman myths, Greco-Roman myths, those 2.
So I think I do think you're doing yourself a disservice when you say there's no literary criticism. I mean, you have found some significant late inspiration, biographical reflection that is never before seen. I mean, unpublished, groundbreaking stuff.
Solomon, you have to know that you're in the presence of the advocate for casual vacancy as one of the great books of the 21st century.
That's only because I'm right, John. It's only because I'm right.
I just want you to know that when I was reading the book, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to hear from Nick about this. But having said that, Nick is speaking truth once again, that the stuff that you found about the family through the Rowling cousins really opens up casual vacancy. We always knew casual vacancy was largely an autobiographical text.
Yes.
But then finding out that there's a calf. I mean, that was just. Are we allowed to talk about that, Nick? Is this?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all published now.
Yes.
Nana Kath was a beautiful find. Not just because it's brand new, unpublished, undeniably true, because it was all there in plain sight. And we just didn't see Kathleen.
Typical JK, right?
Yeah.
Well, the hard part about Nana Kath and casual vacancy, to make the connection, is that makes Crystal Whedon J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
Now, the Price family on the Hill, that was an easy marker for the Rowling family in terms of all it fit almost exactly. Nick's talked about this, that the Price family, in terms of how they live, what they were doing, the dynamic inside the family, that's a direct match to, Rowling and Church Cottage. But when Nana Kath is the grandmother to Crystal Whedon, she's not talking about Diane. There's no way she's got Diane there as Crystal Whedon. She's saying this really is the child I could have been. This child that was on the other side of the tracks,
right?
Not even lower middle class, but
right,
working class, young girl. Seriously. And I've argued that Crystal Whedon is a Christ character, hence her name. But what especially the way she dies and things. I mean, anyway, Nick is right that it's not literary criticism the way I held up this book, The Tower and the Ruin. This was the new Tolkien biography. I don't know if you've read this yet,
no,
Solomon, but
I've heard it.
Wow, get it. And everything you're talking about, this is a man at Wheaton College, and he's taught Tolkien for 30 years, and this is his capstone project, which is a capstone project for really Tolkien scholarship for those decades. Well, his starting point is a point which is well into the future for anything equivalent in Rowling studies.
Yeah,
sure.
But the person who's going to write that book about J.K. Rowling, if the Lord doesn't tarry, and we lived, the world exists in 2070.
Yes.
He'll be referencing, the interviews and the sequencing that you've done here up through Ink Black Heart. Now that's, you've done what could be done. It's certainly,
I mean, there's hope. There's hope for the future. So Rowling's friend Ian Rankin donated his papers and manuscripts to the University of Edinburgh. I don't think Rowling's close to doing that yet, but maybe in the future, or we may have to wait for an authorized biography. Now,
well, yes.
Unfortunately, yours is not an authorized biography. So you had to do all of your research outside of Rowling Incorporated. I mean, was there any help from the office or the publisher or the agent?
There is an entire saga to my interactions with J.K. Rowling via her people. And I say that with respect, really, the last couple years. Thing I would say, and you gentlemen will appreciate this, I'm slightly nervous about some of the things I would say because I literally have no idea how much she's watching. And I don't say that to sound ridiculous, but a month ago, Simon & Schuster, who distributes my publisher, who's distributing through my publisher, or my publisher's distributed through Simon & Schuster, they were contacted by J.K. Rowling's agent, right? That's what they said, J.K. Rowling's agent. And the agent was complaining about the Amazon description of the book. Not anything in the book, the Amazon description, like a sentence we wrote there, contacting Simon & Schuster to get Amazon to take it down. And so my publisher said, okay, we'll remove this sentence. And the sentence said, J.K. Rowling tried to impede research efforts of author. That was the crux she didn't like. It's totally factual. True. It's totally factual. So my publisher said, and initially, I came to this project and still do, came to the project as someone who has respect for Miss Rowling as a person, and this is not meant to sound ridiculous, but as someone who's my elder, quite frankly, by 40 years, I was raised very traditionally, Mr., Mrs., Miss, respect for the elders, honor your father, your mother, all that. My mother was so appalled by the fact that JK came after parts of my research because she wanted me to maintain a veneer of respect. So that was disappointing to my mother. God bless her. But I felt I had to do what I had to do for research. That aside, a month and a half ago, my publisher was contacted by her agent saying that statement was inaccurate and defamatory and take it down or else. My publisher took it down because if we got into some kind of disagreement, then Amazon could remove the entire page and I would have had no way to sell the book at publication time. So I literally have no idea whether or not some of her folks are listening. So with that caveat, the thing I would say is, no, I didn't get help. I initially reached out. I wrote a letter, like a long, personal, thoughtful, I believed it was a thoughtful letter proposing the biography, saying what my intentions were, who I was, why I had an interest, all that. And I was able to contact Neil Blair. and spoke with him. And he's a nice guy, friendly guy. And Alan Dershowitz called him and said, I can tell you, J.K. Rowling has nothing to fear from Solomon. I would work with Solomon if I were you. Very respectable biographer, whatever. I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but it was nice of him to say that. He said
that's a nice recommendation. Yeah.
He said that to Neil Blair. Neil Blair had worked with him in the 90s, so that meant a lot to him. And Neil Blair basically said, look, Solomon, it's nothing personal. My instructions have been to not pursue any biography or autobiography. That is what was said to me. And so I said, okay, but will she be okay? I was so naive at the time. I said, will she be okay if I just write it either way, even if I'm respectful in how I go about things? He said, I think, and I'm not giving away anything confidential, obviously, but he basically said, no, I don't think she'd prefer that. And then I told him, and I laid out my reasons why I wanted to move forward. And it was basically, I'm one of many millions who's been very impacted by her work. She's obviously a very public figure. I would like a resource text for my own use and my own research and interest. And I think there are others out there who would want the same. So that's why I'm moving forward. And then I went to the UK, and this is the critical point. I went to the UK in the summer of 24 for another tour, the tour I mentioned earlier that I lead, themed around Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, and J.K. Rowling. We visit London, Bournemouth, Oxford, Edinburgh, the Scottish Highlands. We stay in 4- and 5-star hotels, eat at wonderful restaurants, see scenic sights, the Chalk Cliffs, Stonehenge, House of Parliament, Big Ben, Edinburgh Castle, and beautiful historic scenic sites related to Tolkien, Lewis, J.K. So I was there running that tour, got finished with it, was already in the UK. So I figured that this would be a good time to conduct some of the research I needed to do, to visit once again Tuthill, Exeter. I'd already been to Edinburgh multiple times. And in terms of research for the biography, David McCullough, who you gentlemen may know of, was America's great historian. He's passed on, but he wrote biographies of Adams, Truman. For people who don't know, he was just a legend. And one of the things he would do, he would walk in the exact places where his subjects walked. And it does two things in my experience when you can do that. One, it emotionally brings you there. It makes you feel things that you wouldn't feel unless you were there. And in terms of writing, you really want to try and feel some of the emotions that might have been felt by the subject, in my opinion. Second thing is, well, it also helps you write with an emotional depth and fervor and passion. And the second reality is, of course, in the case of Edinburgh, some of the layout of Edinburgh hasn't changed since the 90s. Some of it has, obviously. So you are actually seeing what she saw in some cases. And so when you're there and you're writing and you go, okay, if she was sitting at the corner table in Nicholson's looking down to North-South Bridge, here's what she would have seen. And obviously I would verify, go back with pictures and video to make sure that the details I had were accurate. So it's very helpful from that standpoint. When I was writing about her pushing her baby, Jessica, in the stroller through windy Edinburgh, like all the tales and legends say, which are, as you know, all true as far as we know, to be there in my mind as I was writing, it opens doors. Emotionally and literally, for writing it and describing it and making people feel it and see it, try and see it and be there for folks who haven't been there and who may never be there. So, okay, long tangent. All that to say, was there for that reason and for the second reason, which John, you knew about in advance, because I reached out to you and I said, John, I'm going to England and Scotland on a research trip related to J.K. Rowling, and I had a document of dozens of people I wanted to try to interview. And you essentially said to me, no, you did say to me, there are many people I would want you to try to interview, but none of them will talk to you if they ever want to speak with Miss Murray again. I think that's a near exact quote. And my father, who's a wise man and who I travel with because I'm not old enough to rent a car, and he drives with me, and we will do a lot of this research together. He said to me, Solomon, sounds like Dr. Granger, Dr. John is spot on there. And I said, well, we still got to try. So I ended my tour, and I had my list of names and addresses, and I started knocking. And I don't know legally if I should even say who I knocked at, but let me just say this. There are people in the acknowledgements of Christmas Pig and the Ichabod. If I remember, the Ichabod has an acknowledgements page, but definitely the Christmas Pig. There are people in the acknowledgements to that book who I came face to face with who were very surprised to see me. And what I did was what I believed was my duty as a biographer to do. And this sounds so high and mighty, but Robert Caro, when he was researching his biography for Lyndon Johnson, got to a point where the only research available to him was to literally go to Johnson City in Texas and start knocking on the doors, because he didn't have emails at that time or phone numbers. And I was in that case. I said, even if they say no or they turn me away, I have to try and see who might talk. I don't have emails, don't have phone numbers. This is the only option left. It was totally uncomfortable. On top of the fact that you're asking them to speak about JK, who, as you know, regularly gets death threats in the UK, and was, while I was there, on the front cover of the newspapers there. So it's JK. And then second of all, with all due respect to you, Nick, you know, British people, I think, have a healthy suspicion of Americans. So here's this young American showing up at their door, asking to talk about J.K. Rowling. So that combination, understandably, people didn't really want to talk. So I kept going about my business. It was totally uncomfortable, totally didn't like it. You know, just had to grit my teeth and bear it and see if maybe one door would open and maybe someone would let me in, maybe, somehow. And there I was in Edinburgh on a loop through my tour, you know, been up into different parts of Scotland, out to the west, into Glasgow, down to Newcastle, back up to Edinburgh. And I get an email. It says, "We represent J.K. Rowling." Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And by the way, I can quote this freely because the letter's right here. My publisher said legally this is the only way to do it. So this was what I got. And I won't quote the whole thing, but essentially it said, "Dear sir, we act on behalf of J.K. Rowling. We understand that you are in the process of writing an unauthorized biography of our client, and in conducting your research, you have made unsolicited approaches to members of our client's team, her family, and her friends." It goes down to say, which is nice, right? "Our client recognizes the right of every author to conduct research in an appropriate manner." But then basically said she doesn't like the way you're doing it. "At this stage, our client does not intend to take matters further, but it should be noted that she will not tolerate any further invasion of privacy to those close to her." Now, when I got that letter, I was 21 at the time, in Edinburgh, long way from home, exhausted, depressed, because the research had gone exactly as John said it would go. And here's this letter from JK, the exact person I want to talk with, or from her lawyer. And yay, JK knows my name. She knows who I am, right? Oh, that's cool. And then whatever this letter meant, I didn't know if her bodyguards were going to show up at our hotel. And I mean, what did the threats mean? I had no idea. So I wrote a long letter back saying, "Oh my gosh, here's exactly what I was doing and who I spoke to. Here's exactly why I was doing it and what my intentions were. I did not intend to cross any red lines, and out of respect to Miss Rowling, I will stop." And I did. I stopped that aspect of my research, went down to Wales, met with Steve Eddy, her high school English teacher, and then with my tail between my legs, came back home to the US. So that's we probably all have JK stories to share. That's her people coming after my Amazon description is one. This letter is one. Oh, and then, of course, the interesting thing was, which maybe will be of interest to you gentlemen, is I met Neil Blair accidentally. I was at a conference in London, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, which is run by Jordan Peterson, who I ended up spending a bit of time with later. And that conference, there were 4,000 people at this conference in London. Liz Truss was there. I was right across the table from her. Nigel Farage was there. Kemi Badenoch was there. Badenoch was there. The elites of the Conservatives and the Reform and other interesting people were there. And I walk into a room where Kemi is being interviewed by Barry Weiss from the Free Press here in the US. And I bump into Douglas Murray, the UK journalist, real firebrand, interesting guy. And I tell him I'm doing a research project on J.K. Rowling. And he says, "Oh, you must know Neil Blair." And that's not to mock him at all. It's just, he's got a distinctive accent. He says, "Oh, you must know Neil Blair." I said, "Yes, sort of." And he said, "Well, he's right here in the front row." And I thought, oh my gosh, wow, it is him. So I walked to the front of the room. He was in the front row for Kemi's event. He was there with billionaires and different people from the UK, as he should be, right? And I said, "Neil Blair, hey, Neil, Solomon Schmidt, I'm working on a biography of JK. And he said, "I know who you are." And it wasn't like threatening, but he smiled. And then I came up to him after the event and I basically said, "Neil, I understand why you might not have reason to believe this, but I really mean no harm to J.K. Rowling. And there are things I have been told during the course of my research that I don't feel are necessary to publish, that aren't relevant to her life story, and I'm not. And I have a document of what some of those things are." And he said, "I appreciate that. Thank you." And then later we ended up walking into the conference of 4,000 people into the big auditorium at the exact same time. And I had a seat saved and I said, "Neil, can I offer you a seat?" "Oh, sure." So we sat and we listened to the whole speech together and chit-chatted. And then that was it. And we communicated a little after that. So all that to say, nice guy. But I was also really conscious of the fact that this is the man who controls, maybe not controls, but has the levers to JK's charity, to her film company, to her literary endeavors, to all of it. And that was just overwhelming to think about. And the fact that you know, gentlemen, better than anyone, the fact that there are very few people like that who have that level of access to JK. So that was really something. But he really, seriously, nice guy, friendly guy, but lots of power, obviously.
Neil Blair, we should do a whole show on Neil Blair because the difference between Agatha Christie and J.K. Rowling and the difficulties that Christie had and her need to produce a book almost every year with her tax problems and such was because she didn't have an agent that would protect her. And the giant shift in Rowling, what the difference between Team Rowling, which is just those around her, friends of hers and stuff like that, and Rowling Inc., is when Rowling broke with Christopher Little to go to Neil Blair and say, "I want professional representation that will protect all my interests across all these different media." And so the world has a lot, Rowling personally thanks him at the end of every book, because he's guided her and her family so that they've had reasonably human lives rather than have been washed away with all these things. So yeah,
Solomon, you describe him as a nice guy, but I think the most he's been in print as his role as the head of Rowling Inc. was at the time of Casual Vacancy. And the newspaper articles were sort of evenly split between a review of Casual Vacancy and a review of the process of trying to get the copy to review Casual Vacancy. And Neil Blair was described as in one of the American publications as Rowling's Rottweiler.
Yeah, I mean,
Well-
we use the expression here that that Rowling has barracuda barristers. That she is, and the man who's in charge of who gets thrown in that pool of barracuda barristers. That's Neil Blair.
The only thing I said, which I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and again, this does not sound. This really is not meant pridefully at all. It was just a joke. But I had loose lips sink ships, right? But I had a friend who this was during my research process, probably a year or a few months after I had met Neil Blair, probably a year after I had gotten the letter from her lawyer, and saw him bumped into him at a restaurant here in Buffalo, and we were talking about some of the travails of my research, and because I wrote the book on Alan Dershowitz, I came to know quite a few lawyers. The most powerful lawyers in the world, just caveat there. So this friend was talking, and he said, well, be careful with JK because she's got much better lawyers. And another friend who was at the table was sitting there going, no, she doesn't. So that was my only wiping the beads of sweat off the forehead. No, but when I mean nice guy, what I should be very specific. Cordial, humble in his communications with me. What I mean by that is used my name in messages, which counts for something, gave me an explanation, was friendly and not aggressive in our communications. I got some amount of aggression from the letter from Kirstine McDonald, but even that, when I wrote the long response afterwards and I reiterated again, here were my intentions, I mean no harm, and I also said again, here's my letter to Miss Rowling, I've mailed it to these different places. It would be wonderful if this could at least be passed on to her and she could acknowledge receipt. I don't need a letter back, obviously, but that didn't happen, which with all due respect to Miss Rowling, it would have been nice to at least hear, hey, understood, no thanks. I get why she didn't, but I mean, that would have been nice. But after that, Kirstine wrote me a nice note. So yeah, that's to clarify the nice guy comment. I never got, which you saw from the book, I never got to the bottom of Neil Blair, Christopher Little controversy. And quite frankly, because I had communications with Neil Blair, I didn't want to go there. And maybe no, but maybe that was a fault on my part. That might be a anecdote and story that comes out when perhaps Neil Blair and JK have passed on, which I hope is a long time in the future. But
well, it'll be in the critical biography. I mean, if Rowling opens the gates,
sure,
and it won't be. My prediction is we're going to get that after Strike 10.
Okay.
That Rowling's 2 signature series will have been completed.
Right.
She'll be 63, 64.
Yep.
And yeah, God willing, she'll write another great series. I mean, no one imagined at the end of Harry Potter that she was going to be equal to that kind of achievement again. And I really do think that the Cormoran Strike series on different metrics, but on several metrics, it outstrips Harry Potter.
Wow.
In terms of complexity, certainly in terms of literary illusion and things like that. I mean, this book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we see a critical biography, it'll be after the Cormoran Strike series is done.
I can't wait to read it. By the way, I'd love to see it come out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got a few years where you're going to be the benchmark.
I think
your book is going to be that.
There's some question. I mean, to do what you say it should do, a critical biography would have to be an authorized critical biography. And then there is an argument of exactly how critical an authorized biography could be.
Well, yes. Well,
Time
What
time
I
will tell.
what I feared, which is not to insinuate, well, it does insinuate something bad about JK's character, but I don't intend it that way. These two journalists wrote the definitive biography of Tiger Woods, Jeff Benedict and another man who escapes my my memory, but Jeff Benedict wrote biographies on LeBron and the Patriots dynasty. He had the involvement of Robert Kraft and Tom Brady for the dynasty book. But for Tiger Woods, it was unauthorized. And what he said is Tiger Woods was willing to do it as an authorized biography under the condition that every single word would be controlled by him. When I wrote the book on Alan Dershowitz, I started it initially without his involvement and then got his involvement sometime into the project. And I was upfront with Alan about the fact that I was talking with Noam Chomsky and people who hate him. And I said that to him, and he knew that. And I put a lot of the negative content in the book, so much so that Dershowitz read it and said, "My gosh, Salman, I can't believe how much you quoted the critics." But he understood why I did it. But he never read a word of the book before it was published, not one word. First time he read it was like everyone else. But that was wonderfully refreshing, right? But you have to wonder, like Nick said, if perhaps we would get the Tiger Woods treatment. I don't know if JK puts out that book. I hope not, but it's a reasonable guess.
The authorized biography is going to be pretty much an autobiography with critical content.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, what I really enjoyed about your book, Solomon, is you've clearly transferred that ethos of the Dershowitz biography into your work with Rowling. In that everyone is political to some degree, whether it's straight politics or social justice or religion. Everybody is political.
Sure.
And there are parts of your biography that make me, as a wishy-washy socialist liberal, really uncomfortable.
Sure.
And I'm confident that there's bits in those biographies that will make John socially conservative, a right-wing bigot, a Christian fundamentalist, extremely uncomfortable as well. I found it really difficult to get. It was like I was almost reading two different people, because you weren't just noting the controversies, you were quoting people from both sides of the argument.
Yes.
Which I think is a real achievement. That is not easily done. I mean, it appears like you managed to entirely devoid yourself of bias when you were going into the book.
This is going to sound, so many of these things sound pretentious. It's my number one ambition to do that and achieve that. So to say it's immensely satisfying to hear you say that, it is. And the reason is, I believe there's a great need, especially in the United States, for the David McCullough-like aspect of research and writing about, especially political history, to return to at least some attempt at objectivity. I have an older friend of mine named Verlyn Flieger, who's one of the top Tolkien scholars. She's about 94 years old. Politically, she leans Democrat. I'm not registered to vote. I don't even vote. I'm not registered with a political party. I don't vote out of an attempt to try and distance myself from politics. And I do get some pushback for that, which I understand. But that's what I was trying to do with the JK book. I had an editor of the book who has a transgender sibling who told me outright, "Salman, coming at this book as someone who's opposed to JK." And he said something similar to what you said, Nick. But what I did is I interviewed two of the people at the forefront of the controversy in the UK, Jane Fay, who's a prominent transgender activist who's been working with a lot of different transgender movements behind the scenes to counteract the efforts of For Women Scotland and other organizations funded by JK. And then I talked to Debbie Hayton, who's a transgender person who is on JK's side. And when I interviewed them and asked them questions, I was genuinely trying to understand it. Trying to understand the 2010 Equality Act and the 2004 Gender Recognition Act and all these things, and trying to wrap my brain around it. So yeah, that's anyway, long answer to say I'm glad to hear that, and I hope it's useful as a resource to as many people as possible because of that.
I genuinely think that is a remarkable achievement. I mean, John and I both consider ourselves open-minded, but that usually consists of letting the other guy finish before we tell them they're wrong. Whereas you have genuinely seemed to present both sides even-handed. Remarkable.
But you say in your acknowledgements, please don't think because I gave them equal time that I think that they're equally valid, and that was refreshing. I mean, it was just like, okay, I did my job. That's not where I stand personally, but I did my job.
One of the things I wrote, John, there's I don't remember if it was in here it is. And this sounds, I don't mean to appear ridiculous by quoting myself, but I wrote, so I really made a point to write this. Regarding the controversy around sex and gender, I did my best to present the issues at hand in an accurate and objective way. By this, I do not mean, quote, trans people versus transphobes. Both have some good points, end quote, though I understand it might be taken that way by some. And that's from Natalie Wynn, the transgender YouTuber, who said that what you just mentioned, Nick, if I'm sitting here going, I tried to be objective, in Natalie's opinion, that's me saying transphobes have good points. And I had someone say this to me because I'm working on a research project on Donald Trump. And, not another non-controversial guy, person. And I said, I'm trying to write an objective book on Donald Trump. And this person got very upset with me. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I don't vote for anyone. I don't vote. I'm not with a political party. I'm not. And this person said to me, how could you write an objective book on Donald Trump? Would you write an objective book on Adolf Hitler? And what I said is, leave Hitler aside, because as someone who has friends who survived Gestapo raids, as someone who has Jewish friends who lived in ghettos and were brought out and escaped concentration camps, I know them, I speak with them. Leave Hitler aside, shame on you for bringing him up. Leave him out. The way you study, interpret, and report historical fact, or what the nearest you can come to historical fact, is not supposed to be changed whether or not you find the subject at hand to be morally reprehensible. Not that you can ever achieve that, but no, it's not supposed to be, from my understanding. And no. I hear people say, which I agree with, you can't erase bias, you can't be totally objective. Totally agreed, of course, understood about that. But yeah, I belabor the point. And it was a tightrope to walk, but the Dershowitz book, by providence, really, by God's grace, prepared me for some of that. My mother, God bless her, was so concerned by these controversies I was wading into, and I get comments on my social media page and Goodreads page from people who say you're a bigot and all these expletives that are blacked out. And I had a transgender individual in person somewhat confront me about the book. I was at an event for Jordan Peterson, and there were transgender protesters, and I started talking to them and asking them about Jordan Peterson and why they don't like him and what their thoughts were. And I brought up J.K. Rowling because I was researching her. And I said, I'm working on a research project about J.K. Rowling. They'd all grown up reading Harry Potter. These were 35, 40-year-old they were millennials, transgender activists. And the one activist, the best this individual could, and I'm not saying that with disrespect, this individual could come up with, the best they could do was they looked at my lapel, and I had a Hogwarts lapel pin on. And the person said, is that a Hogwarts lapel pin? I said, yes. I said, what's wrong? What's wrong with Harry Potter? And they said, well, Harry Potter's great when you're a kid. That was the critique. That was the problem, was it's childish. So I went, okay. I'm sorry. I said this to them. I don't understand at what point you understood that JK was the monstrous, genocidal bigot. That's not me saying I agree with her viewpoints, but just please explain to me how the lady who wrote, as Ivana Lynch so eloquently said, the lady who wrote Dumbledore, who gave the lines to Dumbledore, here was, I think Ivana Lynch was quoted as saying, here was the hand that brought us Dumbledore, and I was corresponding with her when she wrote letters to JK. So the lady who wrote Dumbledore and all that, like, at what point did that person become what is being said? Just help me understand that, please. And they had their comments about, well, she didn't really mean it when she came out to support gay people. And I know, John, you and Nick have written extensively about Fantastic Beasts, and your commentary made a lot of sense to me about the queer baiting, which seemed pretty blatant. And if I was transgender or lesbian or gay, I would be very offended by the fact that she consistently said this will be portrayed outright, and then whoever made the decision to portray it somewhat, not really at all, in Secrets of Dumbledore finally did it. I mean, I understand that. Obviously, that's a whole tangent, but I digress. I go on and on.
No,
I want to
fascinating.
get back to the people you talk to for the book, because I mean, there's two things here. One is you couldn't talk to all the people you wanted to talk to. You couldn't get to, you talked to Neil Blair, but not about J.K. Rowling and his relationship with her. You didn't get Starsky and Cox. You couldn't get Lucy Shepard.
I tried.
But you did get Jorge Arantes, and you got Barry Cunningham, the publisher who signed Rowling to Bloomsbury. You talked to Steve Eddy, as you mentioned, okay, one of Rowling's English teachers.
Sure.
And you got Ben and Bryony, the American cousins, the Rowling cousins. And in addition to that, you did an exhaustive tour through all the interviews that she's done since 1997 to the present. Okay. I mean, in fact, your coverage of the interviews goes well beyond Ink Black Heart. I mean, you got some stuff in, I mean, the books you only covered up to Ink Black Heart, but you covered the interview material, through the witch hunts or whatever, witch trials.
Yes.
That's, you got interviews with articles with her family, friends, fans, business associates. First of all, what was it like to sit down with those sources you could talk to? And how did you find, assemble, and sift through the mountain of interviews that are available? They used to be much more available through Accio Quotes. Now you've got to actually go and find those things.
I think the last article I would have been able to research in terms of an interview she gave, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was a May 2025 interview with the Times in which she discussed her charitable endeavors. And I think past that, it's been ex-hosts, if I'm not wrong. So yes, you're right, John, from 97 on. And then in terms of the interviews, I'll just make these comments because I know you will appreciate this. There's, among anyone, you guys will appreciate these references. I got close to Lucy Shepard. I talked to Graham Wilde, who was JK's art teacher, who knew Lucy. He sent her my interview request. I thought there might be some break there. And then I got the word back, nope, she's still in contact with JK. So no there. Pearl Biddle, I found addresses for, but at that point I had ceased my investigative research in the UK after being scared to death, quite frankly. And I don't think I would have found her anyway, or she wouldn't have spoken to me. Perhaps not. Perhaps though Pearl Biddle is one to get. I corresponded with Sean Harris, who said to me, Solomon, JK's the most extraordinary person I've ever met. I can't speak with you. Good luck with the book. Wish you all the best.
That's more than I would have expected. That's what you're describing sounds like Sean Harris.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Well, and we had a connection. The only connection there was is I'd been to Nepal
Okay.
multiple times. So the fact that he
Yeah.
commanded the Gurkhas was like insanely interesting to me.
Yeah.
Which of course you pointed out, Nick. Okay, and then Sean Harris, Lucy Shepherd, Pearl Bennett. Oh, and Starsky and Cox. Is that Lynn Corbett and William Leone?
Yes.
Yes. Lynn Corbett, I found an email address for, nothing back.
Okay.
William Leone, I tried, couldn't find anything about him. Okay, but the interviews I did get. Arantes is another long story, but needless to say, finally tracked him down in Porto, Portugal. And as a caveat here, I've been very blessed to travel. I think I mentioned to you guys at the beginning, I have a father who's a self-made businessman. He's been very supportive of my work. I couldn't do these things without that. I understand that. I try to make the best of that and make my work, honoring to the effort, time, and money that he and other people have put in. So we went to Portugal twice. First trip, I found Arantes' cousin who looks just like him, a guy named Fernando. I went to Rua do Duque de Saldana, the street where they had an apartment where JK was thrown outside, hit the concrete. It's horrible, terrible. It's gorgeous there. Porto's beautiful. My gosh. From the end of that street, it leads to a cemetery next to a church, and from there you can see out to the Rio Douro, the river, and the river banks with the city extending up the hillsides. Well, Porto on the north side and Vila Nova de Gaia, I believe, on the south. So I was there. I started knocking on doors in Porto where, I wasn't under any sort of legal jurisdiction from her legal team. And I don't say that to sound nefarious, but it's just, I knew I was safe there. Well, I thought I was safe. So I started knocking on doors there, and I went into this florist's shop, and this lady didn't speak any English. So I pulled out Google Translate. I'm not looking at my phone, by the way. It's turned the other way. And the ringer's off. I pulled up Google Translate, and we started having a conversation. And I told her why I was there. This wasn't the first time. Not that someone had come knocking to her shop, but this wasn't the first time that someone had asked her about Harry Potter. And I said, "Do you know Jorge Arantes?" I think it's Jorge. I've heard different pronunciations of it.
Yeah.
Jorge. I've heard Jorge, I've heard Jorge, but I'll go with Jorge. So I said, "Jorge Arantes," and she said through the Google Translate, "Yeah, I know Jorge. What do you want to know?" She told me some things about him, which I didn't end up putting in the book because it would have been cheap shots. But essentially she said, he's gone. No one's seen or heard from him in a long time. And she went out, came back in, kept talking to me. And this middle-aged, very sunburned Portuguese gentleman with jet black hair comes in, big smile on his face. And he comes in, he points to me, "Harry Potter." I said, "Yes, Harry Potter. Come here." He takes me out, and he brings me to this little bar area where this guy, Victor, a painter, was off on his lunch break, and he spoke fluent English. And, "Oh, why are you here, Solomon? Here's why I'm here." "Oh, Victor." And the painter guy, Victor, points to the guy with the jet black hair and the suntan, and he says, "Oh, this is Fernando. He heard you want to talk to Jorge." Well, he's Jorge's cousin. So I started communicating with him, and he essentially said the same thing. "We haven't heard from Jorge in a long time." He told me some details about Jorge that were known through family lore and through him just being around Porto, which I put in the book. Things which make sense when you think of JK, that he blared loud music and he was the macho and the chief of the district. You can picture, can't you, JK and Jorge in her apartment blaring music for all the street to hear. You can just picture that. Not saying that happened, but he said that's what he was known for. Whatever. Spoke with him. he told me some things that were known publicly about Jorge or that he knew from the family. Basically, haven't seen him in a long time. So left that trip, couldn't find anything. And then I made a contact at a newspaper whose identity I committed to keep private, who had spoken with Arantes, but that will give you a clue who it is. And somehow he had found him. And he gave me an address, which he said, here, this is his. Okay. And at the time I was communicating with Patricio Tarantino at the Rowling Library. And I mentioned I was going to Portugal, and he said, Solomon, be careful if you go to see Jorge. Understood. Okay. I knew about Jorge, but okay. So I went to the address. It was a small apartment building in Porto. And I waited. I knew that he had a gold earring in his left ear as of the most recent pictures. So I went to the apartment building, didn't know the number. That wasn't in his instructions, and he had forgotten it. Buzzed on all the doors, and no responses. You know, some of them spoke no English, and when I tried to say what I was there for, it cut out. And I was standing at the front door. We're all the way here in Portugal, although we had been traveling already, so we just came over to Portugal. And by the way, I know I'm going on, but I found this to be an interesting part of my journey with Jorge. And I was at the front door of the apartment building, dejected. Okay, this isn't going anywhere. And then, wouldn't you know, I turn, and you're going to think I'm making this up, but I turn, and out of my peripheral vision, I'm at the front door. This person, a little shorter than me, jet black hair, walks out the front, and I see the glint of the gold earring on the left ear. And it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and he had a bag, and he started walking out, and in my mind, holy smokes, that's him. Mr. Arantes, Mr. Arantes. Turns around. Yes. Hi, I'm Solomon Schmidt. I'm working on a biography of your former wife. I started to introduce myself. No, I don't want any more of this. Go away. What are you doing here? Started to get aggressive, and I was trying to be demure and explaining myself. No, got very upset. Don't remember exactly what he said, but he got aggressive. No, don't want this. Go away. Leave me alone. I'm tired of this. I've said enough. You shouldn't be here. Whatever. Grabbed his bag, marched off down the street. And it was a long road. He must have went grocery shopping or something. And there he went, took off. And I went to my father, who was waiting at the getaway car. And he had been watching, probably for my safety, partly. And he said, okay, we're here. He said, Solomon, we're here. Let's wait. And let's see if he comes back, because you got one shot at this. Okay, all right. And I started preparing. I had made up a letter to leave at the door in case I didn't find him. So I started to get that ready. We waited about a half an hour, and all of a sudden his black figure, because he was wearing black coat, sunglasses, jet black hair, black pants, black shoes. As far as I remember, I might have some of those details wrong. He comes back down the street. Here he's coming back, and holy smokes, he's coming back. And so I approached him again, and this time he had composed himself, and he said, and he smiled, and the charm was on, and he said, okay, all right, look, I understand you're earnest or whatever it is. What do you want to talk about? And so I didn't know how long this was going to last, so I was able to work in not many, unfortunately, but a few of the questions I had wondered. Did she talk about her mother? What do you remember about her? Just chit-chat things to try and get some content out of him. And thankfully I did. He shared a few quotes which are in the book. I don't remember exactly where they are, but a few of the quotes are in the book. There wasn't much, but he basically said, I've done interviews before. What do you want to talk about? And I said, I want to talk about your marriage to the woman who wrote Harry Potter and what you remember about her writing of Harry Potter during the time that she was there with you. Because if he had been there, I would have liked to have talked about what specific characters he remembered, what parts of the plot line he might remember. Not that it would have been totally reliable, but just pick his brain about that and whatever other personal anecdotes were there. And obviously, you gentlemen know there's a plethora of things I could have spoken to him about if he'd given me the time, extensive time. But he basically said, look, I've done the interviews before. Then we chit-chatted, and my father came up from maybe emotional support or to keep him on outside a little longer. Started talking with him, introduced himself, shook hands, told him who I was, told him, hey, this is my son Solomon, and hey, he's done this book on Alan Dershowitz and whatever, and just trying to get in, trying to create the opening. And then my father also covertly, at one point while I was speaking to Jorge, said, oh, I have to take a business call, which he did. And then over to the car, which was outside of Jorge's peripheral vision, he snapped a photo of us together, which was later on useful. But anyway, the interesting takeaway for me was the charm factor. He had composed himself, and he turned on the charm factor, and he was pleasant. The second time, pleasant, cordial, gracious. He told me one book. He said that they read the Letters of Austin together, which they loved. And he mentioned, who was the other author? It's in here. I don't remember who. That was probably already publicly known, but there were a few details. He walked back into the apartment, said, take care. I told him I'll send you a copy when it's out. Thank you. And then my dad and I looked at each other and went, okay, it wasn't 2 hours, but we met him, we saw him, chit-chatted, talked a little, got the picture, a couple quotes. It's better than not having found him. And then we came home. So that's a long story, but that's for the record for anyone who is interested in Jorge. Unfortunately, he lives in a small apartment in Porto. The residents there say he's, not doing so great. He sleeps until noon. Sleeps until noon, doesn't come out, plays his music still, and basically lives, nothing like the life we know JK lives. So that was Jorge, and then I'll make the other ones faster. Steve Eddy, I found his contact online, reached out. He was open to an interview, had me to his house. He lives in Wales, beautiful. We spoke for a few hours. No, actually, it was longer than that. Eddy's interview was extensive, and we dug into Dean, what he remembered about John Nettleship. He remembered a couple anecdotes about JK. I didn't include one of them because he was very honest about the fact that he could have been misplacing this with Joanne. Or I think I included it and included the caveat. And the main thing that was interesting to me about Eddy was he identified girls who might have been some amount of inspiration to Crystal Whedon. He had identified this girl, Allison, who got pregnant at a very young age and was boisterous and loud and had a very low vocabulary and was very funny in a sarcastic way. So some of those details I thought, oh, gosh, well, maybe here's Crystal to some extent. Nice guy, and continued answering my questions. That's Eddy. Barry Cunningham, found his email, wrote to him, followed up again, and he finally got back to me, answered some of the questions I had. The interesting thing to me about that, which was already publicly known, but it was interesting to hear corroboration, was he said she had a plot line for the 7-book series worked out. In 1996, she shared some of the details of that with us, including the fact that Harry's friends would die, characters would die. That was Barry Cunningham. And then Ben and Bryony, I found an emailed her. She answered some of my questions and then went dark on me for a reason I don't know. I don't know if JK got a hold of her and told her to stop talking. I don't know. She said that JK and her hadn't spoken for 30 years. That was what Ben and Bryony both said. They said that they wrote letters to JK when her book was published. Congratulations. Nothing. And when Jeff, her uncle, died, nothing. No note of condolence, no acknowledgement, nothing. Which totally confused them because as far as they could tell, she'd always liked him. You might have seen from the book, and you might have already known that they used to call Uncle Jeff Jessica, which was a family joke. So they had wondered, oh, could Jessica have been named after Jeff? Probably not, but who knows? So that was Bryony. And then Ben, again, I found a contact for. reached out to him, followed back up, and then he got back and said, "Boy, Solomon, am I ready to talk?" He said, "Yes, let's do it." And I went to the spot where he lives. He's in New York, and lo and behold, he had a treasure trove of pictures that I had never seen before. And we sat down and just started going through every one. Benton, what do you remember? Oh, there's Ernie, and there's his shop, and there's Maureen, the lady he had the affairs with, and there's so and so, and he was running, and Pete was running the marijuana ring, and all this stuff. And it was like, okay, all right, and we jotted that all down, and so he told me a lot of content, which is in the book, and sold me the pictures, and I got that. It's a legally notarized document. It's a robust legal document. He transferred the rights over to me. So I put some of my money into purchasing the pictures, which are in the book, which Ben told me the ones I had been sold, most of them, if not to the best of my knowledge, all of them had been taken by his father, Jeff, or by Ben, because Ben was a photographer when he was growing up. And some of these were like the pictures of Pete and Ann at their wedding. Some of those were in Jeff's possession and then Ben's possession for 60 years. And a lot of them were taken by Jeff or Ben. He sold me those. And I was delighted by many of them, and the fact that there were quite a few headshots of JK, which was wonderful. And when people, the exciting thing to me about that was when people listened to the Witch Trials podcast, and JK describes herself as very androgynous and self-conscious about her appearance. You could see that from other pictures that were available, but especially from some of these, with all due respect to her, it's clear she's what she said, a very plain looking girl. And it's easy to see that someone, the little girl would have been self-conscious and all that. So I was very pleased with the pictures. And
yeah, forgive me. I'm
basically
looking at him.
yeah,
it's an advert for there should be a law to stop parents cutting their children's hair.
Well, I can't say I'll vote for that in committee, but anyway, yeah. So that was Ben, and then the other things I were excited by, which to me I was just a nerd for these details. I don't want to say I fell in love because that sounds romantic, but I really developed a huge admiration for Anne and really felt a connection to her and wanted to do her memory justice in the book. And I was able to connect with a woman who was about 81, something like that, who had been in the Women's Royal Naval Service with Anne in 1963. And through a historian who does nothing but study the Women's Royal Naval Service. And those pictures of Anne in the WRNS were from those two ladies. So I was absolutely thrilled to find that, and to find Anne's service record and details like that. So that was immense. That brought a lot of joy to me because I did try to do exactly what I said to JK, which is I don't mean harm to your family. Unfortunately, the negative stuff about Pete, I've had people who have criticized me for that. And what I say is, sad reality is JK has publicly, and so has Pete, as you both know, publicly spoken at length in some cases, or at some amount of length, about her tortured relationship with her father. And of course, she put it in the casual vacancy for millions of people to read. So it's like it was totally fair game, and not just fair game. It had to be talked about. I think it's sad. I have a great relationship with my dad. I wish it weren't true. But then, of course, we could say if she didn't have that relationship with Pete, would we have Harry Potter? Would we have the emotionally abusive family that Harry Potter has to live with? I don't know. Would we have had Vernon Dursley? Now, that's not, I don't want to get sued, but let's just, what if? I don't know. Perhaps more of that will come out in later years.
But this has been studied and commented on. But
Right.
I think what I took from your biography, which I haven't taken from other sources, is yes, Pete is an ogre to JK, and Anne is lionized, is the perfect mother. but they were genuinely in love. Pete and Anne were genuinely in love.
Mm.
And that was my new twist on what you've wrote. You know, we're all complicated. We're not, and you know, if you've read The Casual Vacancy, you know, we aren't all one stripe all the way through. You know, you can be a monster and sensitive and hurting and in love, and you can be kind and thoughtless and cruel. You know, that's just being human.
I think, you know, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that, having studied it so much. But even shots like, you know, I like shots like that of Pete and Anne. Some of these are nice. Well, and Pete's denials of the affair with Janet having been an affair, they seem to me to be pretty vociferous and believable. I can easily believe that Pete did nothing while Anne was still alive, and then, you know, started a relationship with Janet after that. And some of the scenes, like I really tried to be there in my mind and try and describe the scene as much as you can, having not been to Church Cottage, but Ben described some of the interior to me, and we know some of the what Pete's experience was on the night of December 30th when she died, trying to picture Pete in this house that he bought and was probably very proud of, and you know, to walk upstairs and see Anne's dead body, you know, like, I don't know, it's just, I find it incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
And I was brought to close to tears writing that portion when Anne died, because for me, in terms of my research, it was a joy to spend time with Anne during that research process. And part of me was sad that the next 35 years I had to write about didn't include Anne. And of course, then JK herself went off into that dark void, which she had already been in to some extent, right? So that it was emotionally taxing to write many parts of the book, especially The Casual Vacancy. I was flabbergasted by that book, knocked down sideways. I couldn't believe how disturbing and dark and sad it was the first time I read it. And then to reread it after I had spoken to Ben and see the thing that really knocked me sideways was when Ben had said, you know, that Ernie, her grandfather, had an affair with Maureen, who worked in the back office of his shop in the small town in England. And to reread The Casual Vacancy, and then Howard Mollison, the lady he has the affair with in the shop was Maureen. The wind almost came out of my chest. It was like, oh my gosh, because then it was like, wow, how many other things are there? Which there were already allusions, as you guys had pointed out, and I knew those and cited them, and to see that was the thing that really amazed me, was to think, my gosh, J.K. put this for millions of people to read, knowing they wouldn't have access to some of the information necessary to decode that. Now, she hinted at aspects of it, and not just hinted, said aspects of it directly allude to her life. But I wonder, did she have a grin on her face, or maybe not, but was she writing some of those scenes going, ha, 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 you know, my little joke on the family lore? I don't know. We probably won't.
She had written a book, or she was writing a book when she was inspired to write Harry Potter. Nick, A Private Joke, is that what it was called?
Yeah, A Private Joke.
And psychotherapists who are literary critics say that the first book a person writes is largely is projection into the world, you know, an exteriorization of their interior history and experience. And I think that Casual Vacancy was rewritten after Harry Potter, and it was based on a private joke and it was a private joke in that everything was a private joke about inside her family, that everybody would recognize these characters. And if Rowling was aware that clearly most of her readers would have no idea who Nana Kath was, and who Ernie was, and the Volson. Nobody would get those things, but I think she had to have been confident at that point that her future critical biographers would explore that at some depth. But even at the time when Casual Vacancy came out, and I was definitely of the personal heresy school from C.S. Lewis, that I don't go there. I just wouldn't go there. But I said in this long piece, look, every single woman character inside this book is Rowling at a certain point in her life.
Right. Yes.
And I just drew the lines. I mean, this is pretty straightforward here. This is Rowling here. This is Rowling there. This is Rowling here. This is Rowling here.
Samantha. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That was child's play and was essentially gossip. And I said, I'm not going to go there. I mean, why? What is it going to tell me when you have the artistry and meaning of this book, which is not, if you're going to talk about the inspiration being from her family, fine. But that's the inspiration. I didn't have the lake in the shed metaphor at that point, but I was saying all the intentional artistry, all the Good Samaritan parallels at the end of that book. I mean, that's how she's elevated that inspiration to another level. And I think that's how A Private Joke was rewritten to take that up to, the post-Harry Potter thing. Now, to future historians who will look at this interview and laugh at me and say, John, we now have the manuscript of A Private Joke. It has nothing to do with Casual Vacancy. And Rowling said that she was inspired to write Casual Vacancy on a plane ride while promoting Deathly Hallows, or just in the wake of Deathly Hallows' advent. My private theory about A Private Joke is that it was that book.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, your prediction about the results of me trying to get interviews in the UK was spot on. So, let's.
We've tried to just find out more about her A levels, and you think that was a pretty straightforward thing. You've got B. Groves and Nick Jeffries and assorted friends in the UK trying to find out just the simple matter of what books that were on the reading list for that that year.
Well, you get a fellow of an Oxford college approaching a school asking, what exam board did you use back in the mid-80s? Nope.
Oh.
Not happening.
Well, and Michael, I think I tried everything to find him, including my publisher was helping me to enlist former MI6 agents to find him. There were two things that prevented that. One was the lack of a last name did hurt, although we had Ken and Brenda, which was helpful information. Yeah. And then the second truth, which seemed to me to make sense, was that given my track record with the interview attempts in the UK, they had gone so hopelessly bad that my publisher was not overly enthused at that point to pour a lot of money into this MI6 investigation. But here's hoping he will be found and that he'll be willing to talk when he is, because as you said, John, that was when Harry Potter started. So it would be nice to try to get inside what was going on in the summer of 1990 or June 1990.
I've pushed hard about the Michael thing.
Yeah.
And I am confident he will be found. I seriously, any journalist in the United Kingdom could go to Exeter and talk to people there, I think. And we have these letters now from Rowling to her mother. I'm confident that, someone that just had, £5,000 could find Michael.
Sure.
Michael, if you're out there and you are listening to this, if you want to talk to us in confidence, just drop a mail to Hogwarts Professor.
Nick and I have talked about this.
Yes.
And right now it's like, what will we do if we found it? Because the man has kept quiet for 30 years. And if he's exposed, what's in it for him? What possible good could come from his talking about this? Or his children, assuming he got married and had children.
Sure.
What is it? What possible benefit is this going to be to him? Now, it might be that he could just we've put out theories about what caused that inspiration in 1990. He could dispel some of those if he wanted to, but he might say that's entirely on her, not on me. So yeah, I'd love to find him. I really would, and I'm confident he will be found. It's just we have enough information now to find him. But when you do find him, all you can do is hope that, as Dick just invited him, is that in private he might share some insights as to what was the inspiration to the book. Because really the thing which is not understood about Harry Potter is what inspired it. It couldn't have been. It could have been Anne's condition, but Anne was not dead yet, and clearly she was so close to Michael, Ken, and Brenda that she was at their home where they were staying over the holidays when she found out about her mother's death.
Right.
So anyway, that's enough about Michael.
Well, I'd love to run this theory behind you, gentlemen, to tell me how off base you think I am. But what initially stuck out to me when I started this book and I cracked open Harry Potter to reread it again, and I got to page 1 of book 1, and I stopped after the first paragraph because I thought, this just has to be really significant that this series is starting with this emotionally abusive family that tries to constrain the imagination, if you will, or the quirky abilities of a quirky, nerdy person. Because it sounds so much like JK's own life. I've had suspicions about, Vernon Dursley. And again, I don't want her to sue me, but, Pete liked golfing, Japanese golfer joke, the Grunnings, the machine work, and Pete was into machine work, and so was his father. I don't know. I'm not saying it's a direct correlation there, but there's a part of me, and especially given all her comments and interviews about escaping the responsibility of parents and being among your peers and freedom from the oversight of your parents and all these comments. Yeah, so all that to say about Pete, which I'm sure has been written about ad nauseum already. You've talked about the bad dad, John, and it's like, it seems pretty obvious to me that this whole idea of the kid growing up in the emotionally abusive family is a direct correlation to JK, but maybe the critical issue to uncover is why the idea of this boy who has a special ability that he didn't know he had. Is that purely autobiographical or no? Maybe that's the crux of the question that needs to be answered.
You're asking this, and you're just asking my opinion because clearly I don't know. But back to what we said, Rowling's animus towards her father, I think, was already in a private joke with the Simon Price family. I don't see the cartoon figures of the Dursleys who are adopted, parents. I don't see the bitterness there, and certainly she has a very good relationship with her sister, as far as anybody knows, sure. And her brother-in-law. And so you'd have to assume that if you're really going to say, connect the dots here, the Dursleys are her family thing. I just don't see it.
Sure. I think at least Mr. Perhaps parts of him.
I think that owes at least as much to the evil stepmother trope.
That's a fairy tale.
It is the orphan story,
right?
Or just Moses. He arrives on the thing and is adopted.
That's right.
So and she said Harry Potter was a messianic character from the start. And okay, so I think when Rowling really wanted to go full bore on, taking it out on her family, to include her mother, we got that in the Price family on the Hill.
Mm.
The Dursleys, I think she's going archetypal in this case. You know, that she at that point, it was less pain to brain as she described it, you know, the agony of this, as it was Rowling really elevating the story up. I mean, that beginning is so powerful because it's Dickensian.
Mm.
And that's Rowling. If you're going to go on the lake part of this, as Nick has pointed out, we make a distinction that you know, the lake is biography and the shed is bibliography.
Right.
But Rowling is so much of a reader, that her biography is informed by her bibliography. You know, not just her shed tools, but exactly how she sees the world and how she imagines things. And so I think the Dursleys are a reflection of her attachment to Hans Christian Andersen, to the biblical ideas, to the mythic ideas. Not so much that it was a, you know, it's not like Crystal Whedon having a Nana Cass. That's kind of like, okay, connect those dots, baby. She's using the same names that she uses for her grandmother. Oh, you know, bing, you know, that, yeah, I get that, but I don't think that the Dursleys are, you know, the Rowlings of Church Cottage.
Sure. Well, and to your point about the Price family and Anne, I mean, it's sad. I hope that's not true, but the quote that comes to my mind is when J.K. said, "My mother adored and never stopped adoring my father," which is sad. Again, all this I just found to be incredibly sad. I didn't delight in the fact that this was the reality, but of course, it's so cliched to say this, but the tortured artist, right? But people aren't surprised when they hear these details. Tolkien, it's so well known. You talk about what Harry Potter is about, and what I try to get across to my friends who are leery of it, I say, look, it's not about witchcraft. It's about self-sacrifice and a young boy who overcomes death, who defeats death to defeat the Dark Lord. It's a totally Christian idea on some level. And Tolkien, he said, death is the key spring to the Lord of the Rings. And it's like, well, what's the common denominator? We're both Tolkien, Lewis, and J.K. They all lost their mothers at vulnerable points in their life. I mean, Lewis was 8 or 9, Tolkien was 12, and J.K. was 25. But we can say at 25, and in her position, J.K. was probably very emotionally vulnerable. So I don't know. It's like it's sad to me, but it's also highly relevant, as you know. And this idea of loss and death, I've lost people close to me. I've known some older people, and so much of what she said about death resonates with me. And people who have read the book, who read her quotes about death, which you both are familiar with, you know, when you read in Phoenix the thoughts going on in Harry's mind after Sirius died, those could only have been written by someone who's dealt with grief, or who interviewed someone who's dealt with grief. They're so perceptive. And
so, guys, this has been so much fun. I can't believe that the time has just escaped us, but we have so much more to talk about. If there's anyone out there who haven't ordered their copy yet, please do. It's
thank you.
Quick sales pitch from me. If you're not interested in studying J.K. Rowling and her work, what are you doing here? But even if you're not interested in doing that, it's a wonderful story. It's just a very readable, very enjoyable, well-written story. If you are interested, like us, in studying J.K. Rowling, her life and her works, you will find it a tremendous resource. Read it as a story and then savor the referencing that Solomon has done. He didn't need to do that. And he's put an incredible amount of work to make sure that almost every sentence is referenced. So in future, when you need to look something up in the biography, you find it in the biography, you can go back and look at the source material. And as I say, this my copy is going to get so much use. It's I'd say it fall apart, but it's electronic. But it's going to get so much use. This is, and for years to come, until we see something like an authorized critical biography. This is going to be the go-to reference tome.
We've gotten through 5 of the 10 questions, so we're going to come back and revisit this. And Solomon, thank you for making time to talk with us.
Thank you, gentlemen. I meant what I said at the beginning. I've a lot still I want to learn from you both about JK. I have already learned a lot from you both. It's a pleasure to be with you both, and I'm happy the book turned out to your satisfaction, because your reviews meant more than anything, because you had the highest standards, as you should. So yeah, I appreciate that. This has been fun. Looking forward to part 2 if you can stand me.
Join us all next week.
Salute.
Thank you.